Really, everything I've been talking about for the past probably month has been Purim related in some way. But tonight I wanted to sort of just really focus more on Purim within the base Medrash of Ishbitz, but lav dafka connected to the themes that we've been talking about earlier in terms of Neshalach, but just to focus in on Purim a little bit. Purim is one of those Yom Tovim that it doesn't make sense. Like, that's what Purim is. Nothing makes sense. So when you try to explain it, it can take you all over the place. So do the best we can. Do the best we can. It's one of those things. Every Yom Tov is like this, but Purim especially. It's hard to pinpoint and say this is Purim. It's hard to do that with any particular aspect of Yiddishkeit because everything is so interconnected with everything else. It all goes back to the one God, who contains everything. So it's hard to pinpoint anything in Yiddishkeit and say this is it. Purim especially, though. So we'll do the best we can to at least pinpoint a certain aspect of Purim. So it's like this. In Marmukah number 1, you have in front of you. So it's let's go through a couple. It's one famous question that the Mefarshim deal with when it comes to Purim. So it's the Gemara Megillah. The Gemara says on Yud Gimel Mebeis. It's a famous member of the Gemara. Amar Rava. Rava said, "Leka diyada lishna bishak Haman." Right? There was no person that knew how to speak lashon hara like Haman. Haman knew how to say lashon hara. What was the lashon hara of Haman? So the Gemara, Rava is darshaning the pasuk in Megillah Sesa, right? So it says that Haman says to Achashverosh, "Yeshnai amecha," there is one nation scattered amongst all other nations, and it's not worth keeping them around. If it's okay with the king, I'll destroy them, and that's the Jewish people. So the Rava explains that when Haman said this, he wasn't just talking to Achashverosh Stam. He had kavana to say lashon hara about the Jewish people, even to Hashem. And so this was the conversation. Amar lei tov nichlinu. So Haman says to Achashverosh, "Come, let's destroy the Jewish people." Amar lei. So Achashverosh responds to Haman. Again, it's not recorded in Torah Shebachsa, but this is the tradition. So Achashverosh says back to Haman, "Mistafina melakav. I'm afraid of their God. That I'm afraid that their God is going to do to me what he did to their earlier enemies, Para and so on." So Amar lei, and this is the lashon hara. So Haman says to Achashverosh, "Yeshnu min hamitzvahs." The Jewish people are not going to earn the protection of their God. Their mitzvahs, the fulfillment of their mitzvahs, are done in a sleepful way. They're asleep from the mitzvahs. That's yeshna echad, yashin from the word of yashin. They're asleep. They're asleep. And that wasn't just something that he said to Achashverosh, clearly that had a major effect in Shemaim as well. This was a kitrig. This is Amalek, in the embodiment of Haman, prosecuting against the Jewish people in Shemaim as well. And Haman is just the mouthpiece of that. And so there is a huge prosecution against the Jewish people in terms of the fact that our Yiddishkeit was asleep. It was full of slumber. It was not with life. It was not with life. And so that caused the terrible decree of Haman. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, things work out for the best. So you would think our celebration of Purim would be avoiding sleepfulness at all costs, right? Because sleepfulness is what caused the problem of Haman. So it must be that the salvation of Haman came with some Malach and Shemayim defending us by saying, no, the taka awake. And so it would make sense that our response, our celebration of Purim would be like Shuas, that we stay up all night or something. But what's interesting is, as we all know, in Marmukah number 2, the Gemara says in Megillah, one of the strange halachas of Purim is Chayav vinish l'vesum be'v'burya ad lo yada be'inor l'baruch Mordechai. You have to drink until you don't know between Haman and Mordechai. So the Shulchan Aruch passes like that. In Marmukah number 2, the Shulchan Aruch in Taf Reish Tzadi Hey in Sif Beis. So the Shulchan Aruch says, he quotes the Gemara, Chayav vinish l'vesum be'v'burya, that a person is obligated to drink on Purim ad lo yada until you don't know the difference. Hagah comes the Ramah for Ashkenazim, and the Ramah says, "V'yesh Oimrim." There are those that say, "Ein tzarich l'shtaker kol kach." One does not have to drink that much, mamish, where you lose everything. You don't know between Haman and Mordechai. Book number 2, "Al yishta yoiser limudai." Rather, all it means is drink more than you're accustomed to. V'yashen, and you'll go to sleep or you'll fall asleep. When we touch Yashin, and when you're asleep, when you're asleep, you're unconscious, you don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. Okay. So, which means, and then, again, this is something the Ramah is not making this up, it comes from earlier sources, but the Ramah is revealing to us that the way that one fulfills the mitzvah of Ad Lo Yada is what? Is dafka by going to sleep. Right, so here's the pella. If sleepfulness was the prosecution against the Jewish people, that was Haman's lashon hara, then so ironically, that's dafka the way how you fulfill the Iker Mitzvah of Purim, which is Simcha. That's how you fulfill it, by being asleep. It should be the opposite. We should avoid it at all costs. So it must be, this is just without explaining, but it must be, that the Chiddush of Purim, this is really the Chiddush of Purim, the V'nahapich of Purim is, that the very same thing that Haman was using as a prosecution against us is itself becomes the way how not only we survive his prosecution, adrabah, that becomes a source of our pride. So whatever the issue was, whatever it means to be asleep, that's dafka the inyan of our salvation and dafka our simcha v'yantif. Okay, so you have to figure that out exactly. Okay, fine. So we'll get back to that. Okay, there's we're going to learn a piece of Gemara Bava Metzia right now. Initially it would seem to be completely unrelated to Purim. That's so it goes sometimes. So there's Gemara Bava Metzia and Daf Ayin Zayin in the base. It's a halacha. The Gemara says like this: Amar Rava. It's interesting. The same member. It's the same Rava. Bala Memra. Amar Rava. Rava said, following halacha: Hayman de'oisvei mea zuzu dechavrei. So you have two people. One person, let's say Ruvain, lends $100, 100 zuz, $100 to Shimon. Yeah. Upare. Now, so Ruvain takes a crisp $100 bill, gives it to his friend Shimon, and 30 days paying it back. Comes 30 days, so Reuven is expecting maybe not a crisp $100 bill, maybe $250s or whatever, but something normal to pay it back like that. But instead, Shimon decides he's going to pay it back penny by penny. He's going to pay the full $100, but penny by penny. All right. So says the Gemara. So again, person lends another person $100, upare zuza zuza, and gets paid back literally penny by penny. So instead of normal $100, whatever, it's like literally a bag of pennies, or even then, it's like every day he's getting another envelope in the mail with a penny inside. It sounds like that. So says Rava, there's nothing that Reuven can go to court and say he's not paying me back. Technically, that's $100. It's just $100 in pennies. Elad is like terumas gabe. This is a chiddush. It's such an idea that Reuven, the lender, doesn't have any legal claim against the borrower. He's getting paid back $100 just in pennies. But there's such a thing that Reuven has the right to have tarumas. Tarumas means a complaint, a little bit upset. Reuven is allowed to be upset. He can't do anything about it, but he has the right to have tarumas. That's what tarumas means. In halacha, we find this in a few places. This is just one of the examples of it, that there's such a thing as a claim. Right? If one Jew can have a claim against another Jew to bring him to court, use the court system to force something, that's called a taina. That's called a taina in halacha. And then there's something else. The guy doesn't have a taina. Reuven doesn't have any taina against Shimon. There's nothing. Shimon's technically doing everything fine. He's paying back $100, but he has tarumas. Tarumas means I don't like Shimon as much as I used to. That's tarumas. So says the Gemara, this like terumas kabeh, Reuven has terumas as some sort of, I don't know what the word, that's right, what's the word in English, terumas? Quarrel? Huh? We'll just, okay, you know what terumas means now. Terumas. It's terumas. The guy's terumas against him. The Amrlay, but why? Because Reuven can say it. Afsadinominoi. Lamaisa, that's a hefset. I don't want 10,000 pennies, whatever it is. Like, I want the money in a normal way. That's terumas. Now, by the way, the Chavetz Chaim in Sefer Avos Chesed, he talks about this. He says this tarumas that Reuven has, this complaint, whatever it is, that he has against Shimon, does have some practical nafkamina. The Chavetz Chaim says, there's a mitzvah in the Torah that if you're able to, if someone asks for a loan, in Kesav Talvas Ami, there's a mitzvah, there's a chiyuv, if you're able to loan money to another Jew, obviously without ribbis, if you're able to. It's not just a nice thing, it's a chiyuv. So the Chavetz Chaim says, if this guy tells you, when he's borrowing $100, by the way, I'm going to pay you back in pennies, well, because of this halacha that you could have tarumas against such a thing, that means you're not mechuyev to lend him the money. All right. So again, you can't go to court and say that this is incorrect to pay back in such a way. It's tarumas. Okay, fine. So everything in Torah is this halacha, and then there's the pnimius of it. So Rav is introducing us this idea that there's two levels of upsetness, of being bothered against another yid. There's a taina. It's like the guy did something really wrong, where he's not doing what he's supposed to do, and I could take him to court. That's called the taina. But Rav is introducing us to a more subtle level. The guy didn't do anything wrong. Tarumas. So we have a teaching from the Saidi Sharm, Vishmitzer's grandson, Rav Gershon Henech of Radzin. The Saidi Sharm has a Torah from his grandfather that this is not just between people, there's such thing as a taina versus tarumas, so too in Shemaim. Whenever there's prosecution against the Jewish people, sometimes the prosecution against the Jewish people or against the person individually is what? Sometimes there's a taina, that the sudden, whatever it is, has a taina against this Jew. He brings a taina against the Rebbeinu Shalom against this person. And sometimes it's not a taina, sometimes it's tarumas. So take a look. So the Side Yisharim, this is on Purim, the 8th piece in Purim. Ksiv, it says in Pasuk, this is Parsha, this is Shabbos, this is Parsha Zachar. It says Reishis Goyim Amalek, v'achrisai adi oivid. Right? So it says in Pasuk Goyim, Reishis Goyim, the beginning, the origin of all nations is Amalek, and its end is obliteration. Right? That's Amalek. So it's the beginning of all nations, and its end is to be destroyed. So he says in the name of his grandfather, the Me'ashilayach, Reishis Goyim Amalek. What does it mean Reishis Goyim Amalek? It doesn't mean that literally Amalek was the first of all nations. But it means as follows. Hainu. Kitrug mi Amalek mitziasev neged ha'adam tekef b'haschala kol oid she'ein adayin ha'adam el tarumas. Said the Ishbitzer that in Shemayim, every nation isn't just a nation down here. They have their reflection and they're enlivened by a ministering angel by what's going on in Shemayim. So there's what the 70 nations mean in Shemayim. Then there's Reishis Goyim Amalek. The 70 nations, each nation represents a particular ra, a particular evil in the world. And when the Jew, chas v'shalom, does something bad, does an evil, does an aver, chas v'shalom, then its corresponding nation that represents that avera, that problem, comes to Rebbeinu Shalom with a taina. The taina is, Pliny ben Pliny did something wrong, and he deserves chas v'shalom, whatever he deserves, right? So, every nation has its own inyan, right? Everyone knows the Gemara says that when the Rebbeinu Shalom offered the Torah to the nations of the world, each one said, what does it say, right? And Hashem said, whatever Avera is that, like that nation's inyan, so that's, every nation has their Avera. So if a Jew, God forbid, commits such an Avera, so there's a taina that the Malachi Yasharis of that nation bring against Hashem as a prosecution. But then there's something that's called Reishis Goyim Amalek. Reishis Goyim Amalek, said the Ishbitzer, is a prosecution that is evoked against a Jew before he does anything wrong. So there's no taina. There's no taina. But there's tarumas. There's tarumas. The Amalek awakens on high a tarumas against the Jew. Not a taina, but tarumas. What does that mean? So he says like this. This is hinted to this inyan of Amalek. This is an amazing thing because that means Amalek in Shemayim is both terribly scary, but also not as difficult as the other nations. In other words, the prosecution that Amalek is able to evoke and bring up by the Rebbeinu Shalom is not so strong, technically speaking. It's not a taina. It's not a taina. But yet, it's the beginning. It comes before an avera. So even before you do anything wrong, technically, there's already a tarumas against you. So Vromza Zos B'Gemara, the Ishmael said this is into in the Gemara Chulin. There's a Gemara in Chulin which talks about in halacha naktinan ein drusel kelev. We find this in Chazal. Rashi very famously says that Amalek is compared to a dog, right? Jewish people are attacked by Amalek right after left Mitzrayim. Chazal compare it to a dog biting. So Amalek is compared to a dog. The Gemara says in Chulin that as opposed to other much more vicious, powerful wild animals, there's something that's called drisa. Drisa means if a lion or something serious animal like that, even by the swipe of its paw, and if it scratches, not more than a scratch, if it really gives a good zetz with its paw, that already could cause an animal to be a treifa. That could cause an animal to be on its last legs, just without a bite, just with a swipe of its paw. Says the Gemara, a dog doesn't have that kayach. If a dog scratches with its paws, it could injure, but it's not going to cause an animal to be a treifa. That's the Gemara says, Naktina ein drusel kelev. The kelev doesn't have that kayach, which means, and this is hinting to Hainu, she'ein kayach chazak k'may shar umas, that the prosecution that Amalek brings against the Jew or against the Jewish people is not as strong as the other nations of the world, because the other nations are coming once there's already an avera, and now there's a real taina. But Amalek is coming Amalek is able to evoke and to awaken tarumas, but not a taina. Ki kitrugim shel shar ha'umas. So he explains the prosecution that's evoked by other nations. Hurat b'makim shabayim b'taina chazaka. That's already when there's a strong taina against this person. Which means once an Aveira was actually committed. So a person, God forbid, does something wrong, and that Aveira is somehow connected to that particular nation. Oh, so now that particular nation, Shemayim, is Ma'ira, a real taina against that Jew. Ava Amalek, who Ma'ira Rashis Hasata L'chet B'lev Ha'adam. But Amalek, already, the inyan of Amalek is to evoke in Shemayim a prosecution against the Jew over the very fact that they're tempted and they're capable of sinning. That's the Nakuda. Once a person actually goes through the Chasron with an Aveira, that's out of Amalek's range. Then there's other nations of Amalek. But Rashis Gaim Amalek is a taina, is not a tarumas that Amalek evokes on high, which is over the very fact of what type of person is that they're even thinking of doing such an Aveira, and that they're capable of doing such an Aveira, and they're drawn to do such an Aveira. Whereas Amalek, the inyan of Amalek is to awaken a negativity towards the Jew over the very fact that you have an innate chesaron. That you have an innate chesaron that even allows you, or more than that, and draws you to do something wrong. Once you actually did something wrong, there's two separate things. There's an actual Aveira, okay? There's an act that was terrible, okay? But then there's what does the Aveira say about you as a person? That you did such a thing, that you were capable of doing such a thing. The other nations of the world, their inyan, they have the koyach of bringing tainas against the Rebbeinu Shalom once there's an actual Aveira. And that Aveira is a davar, it's a terrible thing, and that's a taina. Amalek doesn't do that. Amalek's inyan is to evoke a tarumas against that Jew in what type of person are you that you were capable of that and that you were drawn to such a thing, even before that Aveira was done. The very thought that you're thinking about it, contemplating it, desiring it, dreaming about it, that's already Amalek's inyan. So on the one hand, that's not as severe because Lamaisi didn't do anything yet. But mitzat sheni, it pierces to the very core of who you are because like it's about you as a person. Who are you? This is the Rashis Gayim Amalek. That's what he says. And this is already before the person actually carries out, God forbid, the Aveir. Where there's no taina against the person. There's no actual, there's nothing to actually claim against this person. Rak tarumas. Shaliboy einazach v'naki. The tarumas is that Amalek evokes this breakdown in shalom bayis. It's similar to what we have in the parsha when Amalek attacks the Jewish people when we leave Mitzrayim. If you think about it, it's a very funny thing. Amalek attacks us after Mitzrayim, right? And what happens? Like, okay, we get through it, right? Yeshua ben Nun is sent by Moshe Rabbeinu to fight against Amalek. And Baruch Hashem, we're Matzliach. Yeshua weakens the whole nation. They're hobbling back. And then we move on. We get to Har Sinai. Like, there was no, if you think about it, like, what's the big interruption? But because of this, Rebbeinu Shalom was mamish, like he can't stand Amalek. The very thought of Amalek, he has to wipe out Amalek. What they accomplished already? Like, what was done? The answer is, what Amalek did was shter shalom bayis between the Jewish people and the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's like that now all of a sudden, because of Amalek, God forbid, there's a possibility of the Rebbeinu Shalom looking at a Jew and Bezin Shema looking at a Jew and a Jew looking at themselves is like there's something inherently wrong with me, and I see that and I know that because of what I'm capable of and what I'm drawn to, and that's something that eats at the person, and that's the tarumas that Amalek is able to awaken. That's Rashis Gaim Amalek. So he says, "As maschil klipas Amalek." That's called the klip of Amalek shenikra kelev. That's compared to the dog. That is scary, but it doesn't have the kayach of drisa like another wild animal. Linvayich bekitruga, and it's able to bark, and it's kitrig. So, in the one hand, it's not as strong as the other nations, but it's deeper, and it comes at the beginning. That's what the Ishrit is talking. Ubir in. So now Rav Gershon Henachel explains a little bit more in depth what's going on over there. Ubir in. This, I cut out a few pieces over here that's more al pi Kabbalah, but the Radziner said like this: with every sin, yesh gimel hasatis. There's a 3-stage process in what's going on in Shemayim at that time. And let's understand, he's going to be describing what's going on in Shemayim, but what's going on in Shemayim is also what's going on in your heart, inside yourself. So it's not a matter of only worrying about there's a tribunal up there and they're investigating your case. What's going on in Shemayim makes its way down into our own sagi. Okay, and so the kitrug of Amalek is not, as we'll see in a second, is not only a matter of in Shemayim there's terumas against you. It means down here there's terumas against yourself, that you look at yourself as like a nice farf and so on, that's lo yitzlach, because of the very fact that you have in a chesaron, even before you did anything about it. But there's a deficiency within my personality in the fact that I'm capable of these things, and you have terumas against yourself. There's a certain lack of self-confidence and a lack of avos Yisrael to yourself because of this ending. That's an Amalek. And that's just a reflection of what's going on in Shemayim. So said the Yishbitz like this. There's three madregas, there's three steps. What's the first, the beginning? When a person even has a thought of doing something wrong and a real he's struggling with it himself to do it or not to do it. So Kireishis Asat at the beginning is Ba'emek Halev Ma'oi Behest. It's a very, very subtle kitchen. Again, it's a subtle tarumas that Amalek does. Ve'in other margeshes ba'adayin. It's so subtle that a person at the moment, might not even realize how destructive that inner tarumas is. If you think about it, it's interesting. When it comes to Purim, both regular Purim and Shushan Purim, the day is celebrated the day after the miracle, right? Outside of like walled cities, we celebrate Purim on the 14th. Why? Because on the 13th, that's when they had the victory over their enemies. And Shushan Purim is celebrated on the 15th because for walled cities like Shushan, their victory was on the 14th. So it's always a day late, right? It's an interesting thing. Why not the day of? So Gemara says Yom Gimel's Yom Kol Kolhi. There is some level of celebration on the day of, but the Ikar Purim for each city, whatever it was, it's the day after the miracle. See, in Radzin it's taught, the reason is because the miracle of Purim, which is uprooting and dealing with this tarumas of Amalek, is so subtle that at the time you might even realize, you might even feel you might not realize the danger that you're in when there's a tarumas. Looking back, like, whoa, I dodged a real big bullet over there. But the day of, you might not even appreciate what's going on. So Amalek is, again, this tarumas that a person feels is, as he says, this boimek alev is a very deep place. And again, there's no tain against this person. He didn't do anything wrong. Kiyam tarumas. And what's the tarumas that a person feels against themselves? That their heart is unclean, is unpure, that there's a hole inside of myself. There's something missing in my life, clearly. Again, that's Amalek. The Zeo Reish is going Amalek. That's the beginning. That's Reish is going. Okay. And then there's stage 2. What's stage 2? Is Kishamas. That's when it's not just an urge or a desire, a havamina, which brings tarumas. Now there's an actual aveira that's being committed, and now there's a serious taina. Now there's like black and white. There's actual evidence against he's doing something wrong, right? And at the moment of sinning, the person is enjoying the aveira, obviously, because otherwise, why would you do it? So there's some level of enjoyment over there. Then there's already a prosecution from one of the 70 nations, whatever aveira that happens to be. That's already a strong taina. So it starts with Amalek, and then it leads to the 70 nations. But then it's interesting to Hasat Shlishis. This Yishbitz did not say, but Gershon Hanach is adding. And then there's what? Then there's a third level, a third stage in there being a prosecution against yourself within yourself and in Shemayim. Sho'oida Pam and Amalek, which is also from Amalek. So Amalek begins, Reish is going Amalek, V'achrisa de'ovid, and Amalek ends. What's the final? Hu ba'gemar. That's already after the Aver is done. Kasher nimshach v'nifsak nachet. The Aver was it was finished already. Kol atam. There's no enjoyment anymore. Now you're just full of regret. And then all that's remaining is just really the memory of the sin. That it's trying to, overtake you and to bring you down. In other words, what starts off when Amalek comes with tarumas, and again, the tarumas is not about the sin; it's about what does it say about you. That reemerges when the sin is over, because once the sin is over and there's no actual avera being done, then Amalek says, and now you know what I was talking about, right? It's reinforced. The fact that, I was whispering in your ear that you're a nobody, that you have this inherent chesaron and you're a low person and God doesn't love you, doesn't want you. You see? You see? And then all of a sudden, that tarumas of Amalek now is louder, and it's more clear. And now Amalek uses that as a way to stop you from doing tshuva and from committing mitzvahs and going further in life with mitzvahs. Because now, all of a sudden, you have been stamped in a very clear and obvious way as someone that's deficient.
Bark becomes the bite.
Exactly. Then the dog begins to bite, and then once that could be a serious problem. So it starts off as this is what the Baal Shem Tov there's a famous Torah from the Baal Shem. The Baal Shem said that very often, sometimes the Yitzhar just gets the person to do an avera, not for the avera. Really, it's to get the person to then feel so completely broken over the fact that they did the avera that just the rest of the day is ruined. So it's not that's an Amalek. That's coming from the perspective of Amalek. When Amalek initially is instigating this whole of Tarumas, it's not really about the Avera. It's what gets you, it's the Avera then is proof that Amalek will use post facto to prove the fact that, you see that Tarumas was correct. And then your whole day is shot. And who knows what's going to be after that. So that's the final stage. So Reish is going Amalek, Achri Sayadi Ovid, and really Amalek's been running through the whole thing. So in the beginning it's Paras and it's Madai and it's Yavan and it's France, whatever it is. It always was Amalek. It ends up being Amalek. That's the beginning and the end of it. So he says, that's the meaning of the end is absolute obliteration. Not only does it mean that Amalek's end will be destroyed, that's what Amalek is trying to do. Amalek then reemerges at the end of the story, trying to obliterate you. Right? Amalek stands at the very end. To inject weakness and a sickness even in the heart, to make the person feel that tshuva has been removed from them, that they're not capable of doing tshuva. Again, reinforcing the tarumas that started with. So again, this is the idea that even though at the time the tarumas was very subtle, very, very subtle, so much almost unnoticed at the time, but after everything is said and done, looking back, the terumas was the most dangerous thing in the world. Because if you bought into that, then everything is destroyed. Like I mentioned, Purim is a celebration the day after, when you have perspective and realize what type of bullet you just dodged. So this is Amalek. It's Reish going Amalek. That's the chiddush of terumas. Okay, this is all hinted to, by the way, in the lashon hara of Haman. Right, we started with Haman's lashon hara is that they're sleeping from mitzvahs. Sleep in the Sfarak Dashim always means a vacuum. It always means a chesaron. It means a person has a consciousness, right? The neshama is filling your body completely. What happens when you go to sleep? So at least a percentage of the neshama, whatever, goes to Shemayim. And what's left behind used to be complete, but now there's a hole in it. In other words, sleepfulness always is a symbol of there being a chesaron, something missing. It's a 60th of death, right? Something missing. And this is something you'll find throughout Ishbitzer Svarim, which is, and it starts off as if it's giving credence to Amalek and giving room for this tarumas. But in Ishbitz we're taught an idea, which is that it doesn't matter what type of tzaddik you are, you could be the biggest tzaddik in the world. Every single person, at the end of the day, when you peel back all the layers, has an inherent chesaron. There is some chesaron in your personality, in your avodas Hashem, something. There is that emptiness. And in Ishbitz we're taught, Amalek, it's just like a dog. Dogs are known for their sense of smell, yeah? So the dog of Amalek is able to hone in what your chesaron is and bring that out. The Ishbitz said that also regarding the pasuk. We know the source of Haman goes back to the Nachash, right? The Nachash, which brought death to the world. Haman is trying to just follow up with that. So the Ishbitzer taught, it's whole Torah that he said in Parashas Bereishis, that when all of a sudden Adam and Chava are in Gan Eden, and they have the Rebbeinu Shem was talking to them. The Rebbeinu Shem says to them, "Eat from all the trees, don't eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra." The Nachash wasn't there. That's a conversation between. I mean, now it's recorded in Chumash, but that was a conversation with the Rebbeinu Shem and them. All of a sudden, the Nachash shows up. It's like, the Rebbeinu Shem say anything to you about something over here that maybe you shouldn't do? Why would the Nachash even think such a thing? The answer is because that's Amalek. Amalek has the sixth sense of finding your chesar and bringing it out and bringing your attention to it and making you focus on it. Everyone has their chesar. There's a whole Torah like this from the Ishbitzer at the end. The last mitzvah that we have in Chumash in Parshas V'elach, the pasuk talks about the mitzvah hakel, right? That there's a mitzvah Motzi on Chol Moed Sukkos, the year after Shemitah, for everyone to get together, men, women, and children, to have the king lanes from Sefer Dvarim. It's all mitzvah hakel. It's not for now. Why this is related to hakel, but it says in pasuk over there Vayelech Moshe, that Moshe went, and the Rebbeinu Shalom told him the mitzvah hakel. So the Ishmael says, Chazal already asked, where to go? Like, where's he going? So the Ishmael said, Vayelech Moshe means Moshe was pacing. He wasn't going anywhere. It's like people that are nervous and they're thinking about something, they pace. So where are you going? Nowhere. I'm just walking. Vayelech Moshe, he's going. What's bothering him? So the Ishmael said that what was bothering Moshe Rabbeinu is that he just received 612 mitzvahs. And every single mitzvah is bringing a person to a level of completion. But Moshe was bothered with, but I know there's that chesar. There is that chesar. And the question is, with all the mitzvahs that I've received, it's not fixing that chesar. I haven't received anything to fix that chesar. So Ishmael says that's the mitzvah of hakel somehow is to alleviate that chesar, or to give hope that despite that deficiency that you have just being a human being, there's still hope for you. That's what the mitzvah is. Men, women, and children, no matter what the madrega you come to Beis HaMikdash to receive Torah, whatever, that's ready for hakel. That's not the point for right now. But you see such a thing, everyone has a chesar. So this means, Amalek is built into the system, yeah? So this tarumas is a serious thing. It's one thing if it's possible not to have a chesar. Maybe. So I don't have a chesar. So then if I have a chesar, and if I have some deficiency, that's on me. I have no one else to blame. That's all. I don't have to be attacked by Amalek. It's on me to fix all my chesronos. But that's not the case. Everyone has a chesar. That's just the nature that's the nature. So what do we do with Amalek? So it's like this. Take a look at Marmuk number 5. We'll go step by step. First of all, first idea, and this is something I mentioned we told in Shabbos Ishbitz when we did this Parshas V'yigash. So the Meir Shalach in Parshas V'yigash says like this. He's talking about the whole mice over there with Yosef and Yehuda, with Binyamin. It's not for now. But the Ishbitz says like this. Kibamis. First of all, because of the fact that everyone is born with a chesaron, Kibamis, a person should know, Ein Adam Nenash al Chesar. You're not punished. Amalek is going to try to make a person feel guilty. Point number one is like this. There's no reason to feel guilty over the fact that you have a chesar. Amalek is going to try to pour salt on that wound by not just pointing out the fact that you have a chesaron, but making you feel guilty over that fact. By making you feel like a nobody because of the fact that I have a chesar. So the first response to Haman is, yeah, I have a chesar. That's called being a human being. That's why we're here. The Rebbeinu Shalom made us in this world with chesariness on purpose in order for us to struggle to do the best we can. We're not punished and we're not held accountable over the fact that I have a Yetzer, over the fact that I have a chesar. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no reason to be ashamed about that. There's no reason to feel any sense of discomfort over yourself. That's the nature of being created. That's the nature of being created. Only God is perfect and you're not God. And that's fine. So I have to come to terms with the fact that I'm not God. And that's why, in truth, the fact that Amalek is even trying to make this a point that you should feel guilty over it is coming from such gaiva. That's what the word Amalek equals b'gematria, the word ram. Ram means to be haughty. Why? Because really, you think that you should be God. And the fact that I have deficiencies in my life means that I'm not God, and that's what's bothering me. What type of gaiva is that? Why do you expect to be perfect? So he says, you're not punished, and it's not held against you over the fact that you have a deficiency. What's held against you is the taina, to bring that deficiency out in reality, to give in to that chesaron and allow that chesaron to fester and manifest. That's a taina. That's a taina. But tarum, there is no such thing as tarumas. There is no tarumas. It's a dimion that Amalek creates. Amalek doesn't really exist. There really is no kitrug against a person over the fact that you have a chesaron. Not only is it not something that's held against you, in Ishbitz we find he takes it a step further. It's actually a badge of honor. This is already a chiddush. In Marmukah number 6, the Ishbitzer in Parshas Bamidbar where the pasuk over there is talking about all the Nesiim, preparing whatchamacallit, and eventually bring korbanos to dedicate the Mishkan. So it goes through each name. The Ishbitzer says in Mardi Gazach, each name of the Nasi, of the head of each tribe, the Ishbitzer darshins, and a lot of them are rooted in Chazal, that each name is merames to something wrong with each shevet. A chasar in each shevet. It's an interesting thing. You'd have to pick that the Nasi of that shevet, his name should probably represent what's great about that shevet. But it's dafka what's missing with that shevet, what's wrong with that shevet. It says like this, Hainu, shekolechet haven es chesroina. Because every Nasi was the Nasi, because he was able to pinpoint exactly what was missing, what's the emptiness, what's the sleepfulness of his shevet. Not only is that not something to be embarrassed about, that's actually the source of your perfection. Is what? Is the fact that you're imperfect. What does it mean? Ki ikr shleimus adam, the real shleimus of a person is who? Kishiyakir es chesrainai, when you could recognize and truly embrace what's missing, what's broken, what's chaser in your life. Because the pasuk, and this pasuk is mamish Purim. It says in pasuk yakar michachmu mikavid, that what's more precious than wisdom and honor is sichlas ma'at, is a little craziness, a little sichlas, a little insanity, a little shtos. That's Purim, right? The whole day of Purim is of sichlas ma'at, a little shtos, a little craziness. So the sichlas ma'at represents your chesaron. Not only is that something not to shy away from, that's actually to be embraced and to be proud of. This is like this would say. Why? That's much from the Hapichu, right? Not only is Amalek completely, it's irrelevant that Terumas, and it's not something to be, it's Adarab, it's to be celebrated. We sleep on Purim. The Chesaron is the Mila. Why? Okay, so this is already hard to explain, taken in different ways, but in a certain sense, the greatest, how do we say this in a nice way? The Purim story, a major theme in the Purim story is a healthy relationship, or what you see as an unhealthy relationship between husband and wife, right? I mean, Achashverosh is not the, he's not the classic example of a good husband. Right? That's not exactly what's going on. The whole thing over there is the opposite of Shalom Bayis. In order, the greatest description, the deepest description of our relationship with God is one of Chas and Kala. That's what it is, right? Shabbos is Chas and Kala. Shir is Chas and Kala. It's all Chas and Kala. Chas and Kala means, again, the Rebbeinu Shalom, we can't speak on his side of things. We can only speak on our side of things. In our side of things, we have to feel ourselves missing. How could you truly give yourself over to the Rebbeinu Shalom if you feel that the Rebbeinu Shalom is just like, it will be great if it works out, and if not, that's not real iskashers. Real iskashers has to be that without this person in my life, I cannot go on. An emptiness. There has to be a chesaron in order for there to be. Again, it's a blush in Ikea, but in Maimar Musgar, and in parentheses for those that understand, the Klal Yisrael have to make themselves bechinas nukva, and bechinas nukva demands a bechinas chesaron. That's the nature of reality, and the chesaron is what allows there to be a real iskashus. Let's put it this way, in different terms that maybe is a little bit more easier to understand. The deepest description that we could come up with for ourselves in terms of our bond with the Rebbeinu Shalom is that we were created. See, let me take a step back. Why is it that we have to have this chesaron? Like, why is it that we have to have this chesaron? Why? Why couldn't the Rebbeinu Shalom? The answer is that there's a boyrei. The Rebbeinu Shalom is the creator, and we're the created. So obviously there has to be some demarcation point. The reason why we're inherently deficient is because we are created. But that's the greatest thing you could say about us, is that we're created. See, if we just exist and God exists, and it's just a matter of us finding God, okay, then we could be perfect. But the very fact that we're imperfect is a simon. That's the stamp. That means that we were created by Hashem. And to be created by Hashem is the greatest pride. It's the greatest. It's the greatest siman of hiskashus is the fact that we are created by God. Because what does it mean to be created by God? It means the Rebbeinu Shalom is constantly creating us. If we're constantly being created by God, it means that, of course, we have a sign on us which indicates the fact that we are not God. That's our chesaron, but that's our greatest shleimus at the same time. What allows a person to experience the deepest vekus is the fact that you have something missing in your life. First of all, it draws you to find perfection. And on a deeper level, it's the siman of the fact that you are being infused with life. The fact that I am deficient means that I am not I don't have a self-sustaining system keeping myself going, right? Because there's something inside of me which is broken. So clearly, I'm not a self-contained system. So where is my life force coming from? Where am I coming from? The answer is, I have a boyrei. Boom. There's no greater dvekus than that. You have to have a chesaron in order for it to become clear and obvious to you that you are dependent on a higher being which is perfect. And that dependency is ongoing and everlasting and unchanging and cannot be broken. The chesaron itself is the siman of an unbreakable bond between you and the boyrei. Because if you did not have any chesaron, okay, then there's God and he's over there and I'm over here and I'm self-contained and he's self-contained and we happen to have a business deal together. I give him mitzvahs and he gives me even more good things. But be'etzem, do I need him? No. Be'etzem, am I dependent on him? No. Be'etzem, am I connected to him? No. But because you're missing, because there's huge gaps in your personality, there's huge gaps in your life, and you don't have your own existence, so that means that everything that I do have is completely not generated from within myself. It's generated from God, which means that I'm constantly connected to him. There's no way out of that relationship. You understand? If I would be a davar shalom, if I would be whole and complete, then in theory, I could stand on my own 2 feet and be disconnected from that other davar shalom called God. But the fact that I'm not a davar shalom means that I need the Rebbeinu Shalom, and guess what? And I am dependent on him. Because if it wasn't for his constant gaze and his constant focus on my life, I would fall apart. How do I know I'd fall apart? Because look at me, I'm almost falling apart right now. So the only reason why I'm not completely a puddle on the floor is because the Rebbeinu Shalom is keeping me going. There's no greater level of attachment than that. I mean, Haman's, again, that's why I said it's gaiva. It's real. The fact that a person the fact that Haman tries to evoke tarumas within the person over the fact that you're not complete is coming because Haman and Amalek does not want to be connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom. But if you want to be connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom, then the greatest gift you have is the fact that you cannot take care of yourself. The fact that you're imperfect. Because if I'm perfect, then I don't need the Rebbeinu Shalom. And that's the last thing I want. I want to need the Rebbeinu Shalom. I want to need him. That's the greatest siman of the Vegas. So you wear your chesaron as a badge of honor. Again, you don't bring out your chesaron, but you keep your deficiency at its most minimum, energy level. Why? Because it needs to be there, and the purpose of it is to embody this inyan, which is that you are imperfect, you are deficient, you are not self-sustaining, which means that you are constantly connected and dependent on the Rebbeinu Shalom, which is the greatest gift of all. So that's the inyan of Chas and Kala. It's the inyan of Bechinas Nukva. It's the Bechina of having a Chasaron is the greatest mile itself. Now let's go back. Based on this, we could explain why these members, we start with 2 members of Chazal, right? Rav has said, yeah?
Does that mean that ultimately the goal is not, we're working towards perfection? So is it that we are never meant in life to perfect that Kisar? Like, we spend our time working on it, but we will never actually fully eradicate it because we need it to still exist, or we should actively recognize that we should always have it, work on it, perfect it, but know that it will always be there?
Whatever I think my chesaron is, it's deeper than that. Whatever I think my chesaron is, here, I'll give you an example. There's a story in Chumash. It's one of the story of Pinchas, right? Pinchas goes in and kills Cosby and Zimri. So there's a Torah from the Ishbitzer. The Ishbitzer said that Cosby, Zimri was not a Pashut Yid. Zimri was the Nasi of the tribe of Shimon. Zimri was a very chashuv person, and Zimri, his taina was, Zimri's inyan was that Zimri said that this Yetzirah he's feeling to do this Avera, that's his inherent chesaron, and with all the hishtadlus in the world, he cannot overcome it, which means it's the Ratzon Hashem, and this is ultimately my badge of honor. And Pinchas says, you can't make that decision. You can't make that decision. Whatever you think your chesaron is, and you say, well, this is insurmountable? No, it is. And then, because there's always something deeper behind the scenes. So this is all, again, I'm not going to say this is all in theory, but the point is what that chesaron is that's completely beyond your reach to fix is not what's in front of you. It's always around the corner. And what's in front of you is being generated by what's around the corner, by that chesaron. But it's always around the corner. And again, that's not something to therefore have terumas about. Adrabah, that's what we're created, and we're not the creator. That's part of the deal.
We shouldn't be concerned that we'll perfect ourselves out of existence.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Not a problem. Nothing to worry about. That's all. Again, this is why Purim is a yontif. Lo Yosef mitach zarm. It's infinite, right? It keeps on going forever. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom is infinite, and we're going to constantly be trying to get closer and closer and closer, which means that we're always getting closer and closer to that chesaron, to fix that chesaron. But ultimately, it becomes v'nahapechu. It becomes a badge of honor. The Ishbitzer even said in one place that the reason why Pinchas might not have even chapped all the oimik of what Zimri was claiming. Zimri was much older than Pinchas. So he might not have chapped all the oimik was going on, but Pinchas just sees you're doing an avera, says in Shulchan Aruch, don't do it, and finish. So there's a certain, you have to be a nar, you have to be a little bit childish to be able to not fall into this inyan of, well, maybe that is my chesar, right? Maybe this avera that I'm drawn to do, I have to do it because otherwise, if I overcome it, it could be a very from Yetzirah, right? If I overcome this Yetzirah and I don't do this avera, maybe that's called fixing that chesaron. And then I just avoided myself out of existence, right? Don't worry about it, because whatever you think that chesaron is, and whatever you're capable of fixing, which is everything that's in front of you, is not that chesaron. It's being generated by somewhere else. It's a deeper place. Let's explain. The Baal HaMemra that revealed these secrets to us, which is again the Lashon Hara of Haman, which itself becomes the badge of honor, the chesaron becoming the Maila, and this inyan of Tarumas was Rava. Yeah, this is not a coincidence. The word Rava, the Rizal reveals to us, we'll see in a second. The word Rava is the same letters as the word Be'er. A Be'er is what? A Be'er is a well, right? A spring. A spring is a hole in the ground, right? It's a chesaron. Something is missing. But you know what comes out of that missing place? Fresh water that sustains life. The side of Rava, the side of Be'er, is the bechina of Nukva, the bechina of a well, of a chesaron that's actually not a davar hashalom. It's the shleimus of chesaron itself. See what I mean? Take a look at Marmok number 7. There's a famous Tosis in Brachas Gilum Vid Aleph. We say every day in davening, in Kaddish, Yehei Shmei Rabba, Mevarech Olam Lamai, right? Yehei Shmei Rabba, Mevarech. So what's the taich? What does it mean, Yehei Shmei Rabba? Yehei Shmei Rabba, what does that mean? Rabba is spelled Reish Beis Aleph in Aramaic. So he says like this, Shapir's from Machzor Vitri. So Tosis quotes in Brachas, famous pshat from the Machzor Vitri, Talmud of Rashi, that Yehei Shmei Rabba, what does Yehei Shmei Rabba mean? Shezu Tfilah Sh'anu Mispalim, that we are davening by Yehei Shmei Rabba, She'yamali Shemoi, that the name of Hashem should be full. What does that mean? Kedavsiv. It says in Pasuk regarding Amalek, Kiyad al Keis Ka, right? As everyone knows, that Hashem said, Shelo Yehei Shmoi Shalem, the Kisei Shalem, Ad Sheyim Chazar Shalom Amalek, right? That as long as Amalek is around, the Rebbeinu Shalom's name is not complete. If Mechias Amalek, when Amalek is destroyed and eradicated, then Hashem's name will be complete. And that's what you're davening for when you say Yehei Shmei Rabba. It means Yehei Shmei. Shmei is Shem Yud Kei. Shmei, Shem Yud Kei, Rabba. The name of Yud Kei should should expand. It should become full. Shanu mispalim sheishmoi gadol v'shalom. That Hashem's name should be great and full. Meaning, and again, this is connected with the Mechias Amalek, which means that the description of Mechias Amalek, the phenomena of Mechias Amalek, means the name of Hashem not just becoming all four letters, but it's described as Rabbah, Reish Beis Aleph, Reish Beis Aleph. Take a look at Maramok number 8 in Shar Kavanis by Kaddish. The Rizal revealed, this is just one line over there, Gam Techaven, a person should have Kavana, B'milas Rabbah, Shemois Yos Be'er. Okay, so let's tie it all together. Mechias Amalek is when the Rebbeinu Shalom's name is full, and that is described with the word Rabbah or Rava, Reish Beis Aleph, which the Rizal says is the same letters as the word Be'er. So what does Be'er have to do with Mechias Amalek and the expansion of Hashem's name? Well, the answer is it's all the same thing. Mechias, what does Amalek mean? Amalek means, see, you have a chesaron, and that's something to be upset about. That's something to feel down about. That's something that you should be ashamed of. That's called Amalek. What does it mean, Mechias Amalek? Mechias Amalek doesn't just mean to wipe out the people. It means to v'nahabechu. It means to upend the concept of this tarumas. Mechias Amalek means that what you thought until now is your chesaron to be ashamed of, adarabah, it's the be'er. It's the emptiness in your life, in your world, through which a wellspring of water emerges to sustain life. It's the greatest source of dveikus, is the be'er. You're turning, that's in the Kisser, wherever you find such a thing, that the kavanas of Rabbah, which is be'er, is turning a bar into a be'er. Turning a bar into a be'er. A bar is just a pit. A bar is just an empty pit. But you turn a bar into a be'er. And when you do that, that's called taking the chesaron, and it's taka missing. It's an empty space in earth. But it's an empty space through which life emerges. That's the same letters as Rava. It's dafka Rava, oisias be'er. The word Rabbah, Yeheshmei Rabbah, that reveals to us this secret, that Haman's Lashon Hara, which is that we're sleepful of mitzvahs, is itself how we celebrate Purim, to be sleepful. And Rav is the same Rav that revealed to us this idea that there's such a thing as terumas. And that's exactly what Haman tries to say Lashon Hara about, but the be'er, that Rav, that the bar, that the pit, that Amalek is trying to make us feel bad that we have, Adrabah becomes a source of a wellspring of water of life and good things. It's all v'nahapechu. That's what Mechias Amalek is. So Mechias Amalek is again, on a deeper level, means this nakud of recognizing that my chesaron is absolutely the greatest simon of my life, that I have the sense of dveikus, that I have that hiskashus, is the fact that I depend on that hiskashus. Without that hiskashus, I'd be nothing. I'm barely something now. So gavaldik. I'll make sure that chesaron does not manifest and doesn't take over my life and doesn't allow itself to take me away from that dveikus. But adarabah, it's ultimately the source of that dveikus. That's Mechias Amalek. Not leaving. Again, you cannot, like just with Shaul HaMelech, when you leave one cell left, it'll regenerate. You have to completely eradicate Amalek, completely. And the only way to do that is v'nahapechu. It's the only way to do that is to take the tarumas itself and turn it into a maila. Because if you don't take the tarumas of Amalek and turn it into a maila, then there's always the possibility left. And the chesaron has to be turned into a maila because the chesaron will always be. And so that's the ultimate Mechias Amalek. The ultimate Mechias Amalek is be'er.
A new barrier.
You have to turn the chesaron into a maila without changing it, but you turn it into a maila. You turn it into a be'er. And that be'er becomes a be'er mayim chaim. That's again also why in Chazal and Tanakh and Shir Shirim, the Jewish people are mayin ganim be'er mayim chaim, as the Kala of the Jewish people were called the Be'er of their Rebbeinu Shalom. Why are the Jewish people in Shir Shirim, in the way of Chassan and Kala, described as a Be'er? Because that's what the Be'er means. The chesaron itself, which is the source of our dveikus, that's the simon of our dveikus, that's the source of our life itself. No, the Rebbeinu Shalom should help that all the chesaronis that we all find within ourselves, we should feel that v'nahapechu, that there should be any klov in the world, klov in Sayakim, everything should be v'nahapechu.